Talking nerdy. We're just talking nerdy. With all this talking nerdy. Oh, come on, you wanna talk nerdy?
Yes, I totally agree with what you're saying. And think this is a great place to transition into what we wanted to talk about today. And I'd like to just kind of segue it in there.
Yeah, well, you brought something, you sent
I
something over to
did.
me that you wanted me to watch. So I figure I can put that up on the screen. And if you're watching us on YouTube, you can see it too. If you're listening to this, wherever it is, you'll be able to hear this. But this is from Joseph Campbell Foundation. And so I'm guessing it has to do with an interview with Joseph Campbell. So
Yes. And some
don't,
context real
do you
quick.
want to set anything up for it?
Yes,
Or
I
is it
do.
okay? All right.
I want to set up a little bit. Joseph Campbell, for the folks that don't know him, is a pioneering, brilliant mind from the mid 20th century. And he wrote what is, well known in a lot of circles, The Hero with a Thousand Faces. And it talks about the hero's journey. And you've probably heard about it in one way or another, but you have definitely seen its influence throughout your life in media, movies, TV shows, anything that's a story, and nowadays anything that's with a business. This is not only crucial for writers and storytellers, but it is absolutely crucial for businesses, which is why I think it's great for us to bring this up. Now, this specific clip has to do with the journey of the self and the individual, and some of this is going to be a little dense, but I want us to break it down, and we're gonna have some fun with it. I think I love this shit, and I'm super excited for us to nerd out about Joseph Campbell. So, without further ado.
So what you're saying is if there are not dragons out there, and there may not be at
The
any
real
moment,
dragon is in you.
And what is that real dragon?
That's your ego holding you in.
What's my ego?
What I want, what I believe, what I can do, what I think I love, and all that. What I regard as the aim of my life and so forth. It might be too small. It might be that which pins you down. And if it's simply that of doing what the environment tells you to do, it certainly is pinning you down. And so the environment is your dragon as it reflects within yourself.
How do I slay that dragon in me? What's the journey I have to make? You have to make. Each of us has to make. You talk about something called the soul's high adventure.
My general formula for my students is follow your bliss. I mean, find where it is and don't be afraid to follow it.
Can my bliss be my life,
Well,
love, or my
it
life's
will be
work?
your
Is
life.
it my work or my life?
Well, if the work that you're doing is the work that you chose to do because you are enjoying it, that's it. But if you think, oh, gee, I couldn't do that, that's your dragon that's locking you in. Oh, no, I couldn't be a writer. Oh, no, I couldn't do what so-and-so is doing.
Wow. Okay, cool. Very cool. I'm going to stop sharing here.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot in there. So this is classic Joseph Campbell. So disclaimer, I have read a chunk of his book, but then I stopped just because it is so dense. And it's kind of this storyteller's Bible in a way, because Joseph Campbell, so he passed a few decades ago, and this interview was from the 70s or 80s. It was part of this documentary about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. And at this time, he had pretty much completed a lot of his most well-known work. And before this, he had traveled the world, meeting with tribes, societies, cultures all over. And his purpose, his goal was to understand what are the common elements in storytelling and the symbols used in storytelling to better understand us and humanity.
So that's the dragon he's talking about. So the dragon is a symbolic entity that he's using, which I like because we're nerdpreneurs. That's a very nerdy idea.
Yes.
And I think some of our D&D fans or people who play or read fantasy will get into that analogy. But the dragon is the big thing that stood out to me. Can you start? Well, what is your impression of this? I mean, I can start on my thoughts, but I'm curious, why are you bringing this up, and where do you feel we can kind of anchor ourselves into this with a nerdpreneurs listening?
Yeah, I think the anchor is there's an obvious anchor, which is we are trying to find our path as nerdpreneurs. We are trying to find a way to do what we want and follow our bliss, but we are held back by things that we're told to do. We're held back by things that we think we want. And it's this environment, it's the society that we are within that is telling us to do all these other things. And so much of what we're trying to do as nerdpreneurs and Chris and Frank is to help people find a path to our own bliss, whatever that might be. So I think that is the anchor in this clip, is recognizing what your dragon is and your journey to slay that dragon and to become who you want to be, to follow your bliss.
What resonated to me out of that clip was that the dragon is an almost internal reflection, like the outside that is the dragon. Like he talks about that as like, oh, that's society, what you're saying, right? But then it's what we allow to be reflected in ourselves. And that's the inner dialogue, the inner talk that we have to ourselves about what we are trying to do. So when he brings up the analogy of like, well, I could never do that, right? Or, if I could never be a writer, or I could never change the world, or I could never do what that person over there is doing. That's an internal thing. That's not truism. That's not a fact. That is a reflection of what you see in the world as, and there's, I guess, the analogy that a dragon is mythologically meant to be slain, right? It's the big, huge beast that holds us all back or keeps us, from moving forward. And it must be slain in order for us to pass through that. And maybe society tells us all that we're not those people that we see going out there. Like, I can't start my own business like that person that I follow on Instagram and see them posting all the time, or I can't start my own venture like these nerdpreneurs that Frank and I both interview. But I think part of what we're doing is creating a little bit of a, if you will, a loose scale in the dragon that you can see.
A chink in its armor?
Yeah. I was trying to think of another word for it because it wasn't exactly like that. But in The Hobbit, there is a moment where there's this one little hole, one scale that is loose and gone that allows the hero in that moment to shoot an arrow through the dragon's heart and kill and slay the dragon at that most of important moments when it's about to destroy everything. And so there is this I think, inspirational element that when we go out and find these nerdpreneurs that are being successful in spite of having weird or unique niches, or, maybe they're not born business people or they haven't quite figured it all out. But I believe that we can see ourselves in what we allow into our world. So by putting out these stories to the world, we're, I think, in hopes, this is the objective, giving people something they can then reflect within themselves and say, oh, I could slay that dragon, and maybe I could be like that person, or I could be that success with my nerdy, passionate business.
Yeah, there really is so much in this, and it's very challenging for me to contain myself and not just blurt out all of my thoughts. I'm trying to write them down, so I'm just gonna.
This is a Frank's Talks episode. Let's go.
There is so much in this, and the main message in this episode, I think, is of us, and stemming off of what Joseph Campbell is saying. There is a secret in this to free yourself and to become your best possible self, like Neo in the Matrix. And I will jump back to that movie multiple times because that movie does one of the best jobs, aside from Siddhartha, that I have ever seen, another Keanu Reeves movie, of showing the transformation of the hero from the tyrant to the hero. And so the main element here is that we talk about how we are told these things. Society says these things. That is our environment. So keep that in mind, the environment. And we are told it so much that our consciousness, our ego, begins to adopt this as our identity and our way of thinking. So then the environment directly impacts our consciousness, our ego. What Campbell says in his book, in just the first chapter, he talks about this, the mono myth. He says, in order for you to become the hero, or what is the real hero? It is the person that has slain their ego. It is the person that has recognized that their environment does not rule them. Their environment does not dictate what they do in life. So to break that down, let's use Neo again from the Matrix. He realizes, so in the beginning of the movie, spoiler for anyone who still has not seen the Matrix, the first one, he is told when he's still plugged into the Matrix that he's just a hacker. He's just a programmer. He's not, that's it. That's all he is. He can't make it any bigger than this. That's beyond his britches. He's told that. And then someone starts to show him a new world and they say, you know what, you could be the one. And he says, no, like I'm just, he's got this internal dialogue the entire time that his consciousness has absorbed. And the environment has told him so much that he can't free himself of that. So his ego is holding him back because he continues to tell himself that. But once by the end of the movie, he finally liberates himself. He actually, and Campbell talks about this, he actually dies. He has a death. And then he has a rebirth. He comes back. And this process, in order to slay one's dragon, in order to relinquish one's self of their ego, they have to go through a death and rebirth process. Now, in the Matrix, this is very literal. Neo dies. And then he suddenly is brought back by the kiss of Trinity. Now, there's more symbolism in that, but we won't dive into that part. But what's important to recognize is that he finally started to believe, as Morpheus says. He's starting to believe. And then he starts to actually fight back against the agents. He starts to harness his power, just as any of us would start to harness our power and start to see it. But then there is this dark night of the soul where he actually dies. He is shot in the Matrix by the agent Smith and killed. Then he's brought back to life. And he finally sees it all clearly now. So there's a lot in this. There's a lot in it. And so it is so hard to contain myself, man.
That's all right. Well, if I could try and succinctly bring this down to something that, because what's funny, I have had one quote that I heard in this other podcast that I do with that is been written down on my whiteboard. I have this whiteboard above my desk, and it's something I wanted to live into a little bit more in my thought process. And I think it actually encapsulates this weirdly quite well. And I don't think we've actually talked about this because I've not actually talked about this, but it is our beliefs create our destiny. And so there is a level of what do you believe that really has a tangible impact on your outside life. And to ground this in an entrepreneurial example, there is almost an important delusion that has to happen when you step into the market as an entrepreneur. You have to say to yourself and see the vision of where the business can be and believe in it at a level that is so much bigger than what everyone else does, because nobody else has the evidence in which to say, oh yeah, this is where your business will go. But you as the entrepreneur have to believe, I can make this business successful. Now, you can say it's possible. You can look at these examples of nerdpreneurs that we have interviewed and say, well, it's real. People make money, selling tarantulas and breeding them. People make money as a zombie magician, right? People make money making Dungeons and Dragons content. People do these nerdy passion businesses and find full-time income within it. But you have to believe in that vision for yourself. And that's the extra step that people have to consider, and I guess the question I would say for everybody to ask themselves, because the quality of our life comes down to the quality of our questions that we ask ourselves, is why not me? If they're up there being successful, doing this thing that nobody probably thought was possible, whether it be D&D content creation or self-publishing gaming books, or any number of being a Star Trek comedian, like name it. These are weird, unique niches that lots of the world will say, well, you'll never be successful doing that, or you'll never make it. But when you see these stories, consider for yourself, why not me?
Yes. I think a big part of that is also, so what we're touching on is changing that script, changing that consciousness, changing our consciousness. And part of that is done in a couple ways, but one big one is changing your environment. So I'm pulling this environment thing from Joseph Campbell. He talks about that. In fact, let me just go ahead and read a section really quickly.
Sure. Yeah. And when you say environment, are you talking about like the literal environment you're in, or are you talking about sort of the consciousness, ego, metaphysical environment of our heads?
I am talking about our surroundings.
So literal.
Our literal environment.
Okay. I think that literal environment is definitely a big, important thing. Like I said, I have this, while you look this up, I have this quote above me so I can see it every single day, where I work, where I do this podcast, where I execute on my vision for the future. And so it's, where I record music. Like this one area I've set up to be an environment that feeds into the vision that I want for myself in the future. So I think that, we can discount the idea of environments. And so, are you ready? I've been waxing until you're ready. So.
You did a great job. So in this part, in the first chapter, he's talking about a tyrant and how the tyrants in symbolism and mythology are, and there's so much I'm not talking about that he first prefaces in order to get to this point. So we're going to leap in the middle here, but he says, the inflated ego of the tyrant is a curse to himself and his world, no matter how his affairs may seem to prosper. Self-terrorized, fear-haunted, alert at every hand to meet and battle back the anticipated aggressions of his environment, which are primarily the reflections of the uncontrollable impulses to acquisition within himself. The giant of self-achieved independence is the world's messenger of disaster. He goes on. He's the king of run-on sentences, by the way. So I want to emphasize one specific thing. He says, self-terrorized, fear-haunted, alert at every hand to meet and battle back the anticipated aggression of his environment.
So if I can sort of try
Sure.
to interpret this, is that he's saying that the environment naturally is sort of fighting against your internal ambitious beliefs, and you have to set yourself up to battle it back. You're tyrannized by your environment, so you might as well control it.
That's the perspective of the tyrant, is that they see the environment battling against them at every turn and expecting every hand that reaches out to them to be an anticipated battle, which is fascinating because we all know someone like that just sees around every corner, a threat, a danger, a risk, and I have seen this growing up constantly. And for me, it was always, you know what? I am going to hold out for the good in the world and other people, and I'm going to give people a chance to be good. And if they prove that I'm wrong, okay, I learned. I won't trust that person again, but I'm not going to distrust everybody. I'm not going to expect everyone to be an aggressor all of a sudden. So the tyrant is the person who sees their environment full of danger, wrought with danger, and is defining their actions and themselves by their environment that they fear.
Well, I almost interpret it because you use the analogy of like, well, these strangers who I don't know, maybe I'll give them a chance to be good versus that. And I think it might even be further than that. Like I think it's more like it's imagine if I'm doing this podcast with you and I'm secretly thinking, when is Frank going to screw me on this?
Yeah. Yes.
And we're friends. We're good people that have been good to each other,
Yes.
building a business together and have a belief system. But it is this tyranny consciousness or tyranny of your consciousness. Is it me believing that Frank, when is Frank going to screw me, or like in what's the next way Frank could screw up my whole life or screw up this
Right.
whole project we're working on, and thinking about that. And so every time we get together, I've got that filter on while I'm doing this, and thinking about, well, if I put any more trust into this, or if I put any more belief into this, or if I put any more investment into this, it may not come back because he could always just take that away.
And the risk in that is that you hold your cards close to your chest, and so you aren't sharing your whole self. And I'm going to segue a bit into Brené Brown, but our best selves, our most unique connections are when we are truly vulnerable with people and we trust people. And you can't trust someone and be vulnerable with them if you constantly expect there to be a battle around the corner, or that everybody has your worst intention or your worst outcome at their heart's desire. If you think that, you're not going to have a prosperous business you're not going to look and find prosperous business opportunities. You are going to see threats and dangers in every business opportunity out there.
And I think about it as for clients too. If you consider, well, every client that comes in, ooh, how could they, take away all my time and create situations that I hate doing? And like, building the house you want to live in is very important. I think when you're crafting your, say, business, what kind of model do you want to sell? What kind of products do you want to sell? What level of service do you want to provide? And so there's a very big difference in like, if you're a coach and you're trying to teach people something and help individuals, you might have some clients that you want to turn away because you're visually taking you're expecting battles with them along the way that are going to be real problems for you. And then there will be other people where maybe they don't even really need you as a coach. They're going to do it on their own, but they just feel good because you build them up,
Yeah, they're like, oh, I'm going to therapy, therefore, like it's good. But in reality, I'm not applying anything my therapist tells me.
Yeah, you're just taking the money, right?
And
so
you can just say, I go to therapy, I'm fine.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And so I don't know, this is a complex issue because how do you view your clients, and how easy, I think we're dancing around too, is the idea of trauma and how you interpret your past, applying it to the future, right? Or the present. So like one of the great fallacies is that the future will resemble the past. And there is evidence that it does sometimes, but there's also a lot of evidence that it doesn't. And how often does our rubric for our lives look to the past in order to frame our future? And I call that like I've heard it called this, and I'm borrowing this from a great person called Hal Elrod, but it's called rear view window syndrome, where you spend your time looking in the rear view mirror and then driving forward. So kind of dangerous, because as you look in the rear view mirror, it doesn't tell you anything about what's in the road ahead of you, but you can think you're getting lots of important information about how things are working and how they are and how they were. And then you can apply that to how your future interactions are. So if you get one client, like how many times have you heard of people be like, well, I tried that and it just didn't work.
Yeah.
This was my experience. Oh, I hate D&D because when I played D&D the first time, my dungeon master just killed all of us in the first, round, and we were all dead, and he was kind of a jerk.
And
about
I didn't
it.
have
D&D's
fun that one time, so I don't ever want to
D&D
play.
is stupid, right? Like, or I was made to feel really insecure and dumb for the character I played. I tried putting on a character voice and everyone laughed and made fun of me. And what's funny about that is that maybe they were having a great time. Maybe you were actually funny. But the experience that you've had in your past shaped how you view being laughed at, so that in fact, when anyone laughs around
just
you,
being around
yeah,
laughter,
anyone who laughs around you can cause you to feel anxious and insecure about yourself. And there are people like that have gone, that I know that have had a hard time letting go of the fact that we're not laughing at you. We're laughing at the character you're playing and the things you're doing, that you're creating joy through that. Actually, it's not a personal thing. So there's a lot going on there in the density of this attorney quote that you pulled out.
I want to circle back to something you said about how dealing with clients, you sometimes will encounter people that have in their past been burned, and so therefore they behave in a certain way that you could view as problematic or challenging. Therefore, you won't take the client and you'll miss out on that opportunity.
This is very common on sales, by the way.
Yes,
You may not
I'm
get
actually
that
about
client.
to. So I have an anecdote about this. Right now, I've got a client that I just secured some new business, and I'm pretty excited about it because we've been talking with this client for a long time, and their main decision maker, the owner of the company, keeps saying, no, there's no budget for this. Well, this year, 2024, they had a change in heart. And so I've been working with some of their team to get this approved. And in a nutshell, secured the business. But one of the important points that happened was in a conversation I had with not the decision maker, not the owner, but his right and left hand people on the team. I had a meeting with them, and they told me that this owner really likes to be involved in the process. He really likes to review stuff and give feedback. And it started to sound like it's more of a pride thing for this person. They very much like to give what one of these people said was, if you give him $10, he's going to ask for $9.99. He won't accept what you offer. He's going to have to counter offer. He's going to have to change something, no matter how insignificant it seems. I mean,
it has to be his idea.
It has to. Yes, he has to have some ownership. And I have experienced people like this before throughout my life. And I understand that the path forward with people like this is, okay, I would like to acknowledge that, and I want to be ready for that. And so I asked them, I said, hey, I recognize that. I appreciate that you're giving me this information, and I want to make sure that they feel involved. And I want to make sure of that, because if we plan for it, I didn't say this part, but if we plan for it, then I know how to factor that into my timeline and all of the forecasting I give them for how long it's going to take, so no one ends up disappointed. And that way, I also just don't get pissed off at someone randomly doing this. So we're all on the same page and we're being transparent with each other. So knowing about that and working with them, I think that was a big element of getting the business. It was saying, hey, I'm happy to work with someone like this. It's just part of doing business with other human beings, is you're going to meet all kinds of people.
Yeah. And I can resonate with that, because I'm sure you found this, but do you find that as you've done more and more client outreach and dealt with them, you notice patterns in, like, well, there are some people who are very hands off and they just need to know the facts. And once they know the facts, they make a decision. And then there are some people who it's really important that you have a strong relationship, that they trust you for this to move forward, right? And then some other people are very skeptical. Maybe they have been burned before. Maybe they just pride themselves on getting every detail before signing any deal because they aren't going to be taken advantage of. And that's part of their identity. And so there can be tendencies when we talk to people who ask a lot of questions, and challenge us on things like, well, how do I know that your program delivers on this transformation? How can I be sure of this? And that can be easily interpreted, especially if you're in sales and you're hearing this from multiple people on a regular basis because you're doing lots of sales. You're going to hear that a lot. And then you might think, well, these people are just jerks, or they're just attacking me, or they're just not trustworthy people. And so we can easily interpret that as, I don't have time for this kind of client or whatever. But in fact, they're just asking for a different way of communication so that they can get to that place of, say, trust or understanding that they can then say, yes, I'm going to provide you with my finances, their hard-earned finances. And it's not a bad thing. It's just something we have to understand. I used to teach my sales reps this, that you're going to have 10% to 20% of customers that ask you a ton of questions. And you know what? That's why you're paid so much when you sell. And then you're going to have a few clients that it's easy to buy. Like, you're going to walk out and you're like, I barely did anything in that, and they bought everything from me. I can't believe it. That's 10 to 20%. So you're going to get some easy ones, but you're going to have to work for the hard ones. That's how you get to the point of having a 60 or 70 or 80% closing ratio, is you're able to work with all of these different type of people and find your way to the end result where we all land in happy customer land of buying your product.
Yeah. And something you said a moment ago about dealing with different kinds of people that have been burned. I think of our interview with Justin McMahon. He was the fantasy sports nerd that we interviewed. And he told the story of how when he first started his blog, he had somebody come on board and say, hey, I'll manage the SEO. I'll manage the back end. Don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. And that person over the years started to take more and more and more, until they finally cut them loose a while back. And he ended up just realizing, oh my God, like, they were taking so much. It was such an inflated, back end team. And Justin is kind of burned from that experience. He's definitely wary and weary of dealing with people like that. I mean, he ended up saying, you know what, I'm just going to do it all on my own. If I can't manage the website on my own, I'm not adding it to the website. And so he definitely has that outlook. And I would say that in his situation, and in the situation of the anecdote I gave about this client, these people have been burned by their environment, by the people within their environment, and they're letting that define themselves.
Well, he also is blaming, luckily, himself for this too, because he could have shifted this or maybe changed it, but you can't. But he let it go on for X number of years. And then what happens at the end, if we blame ourselves, so we create this reaction to it where we're like, okay, well, that's not going to happen again. I'm never going to get burned again like that. So I've learned my lesson. I approach this a different way. But what doesn't waver in him is his belief in the vision of the business and the success, right? Whereas I think there are people that when they get burned or they just encounter fairly normal levels of resistance to anything they're trying to put out into the world, wow, I didn't get likes on this, or, oh, nobody paid attention to my content, or, well, I tried this and nobody bought, I have hope marketing it working for me and it didn't really work.
Hope marketing?
Yeah, you understand what I mean by hope marketing?
I think so. But is it like you just hope?
Yeah, exactly. There's no plan. There's no anything. I put something together. I got a website. I posted one time and I hoped it worked, and it didn't work. And so then they say, well, they attach that to their identity. And they say, it's not that my actions were bad. It's not that I'm lazy and I didn't really put in the effort. It's not that I didn't push myself. It's not that I didn't do anything right or copy those or model those who have had success, which are all what things that I think entrepreneurs who have had success have done. It's that it's not for me. I'm
Right.
not an entrepreneur. I'm not a nerdpreneur. I couldn't do that. And this is what and what Joseph Campbell's talking about a lot of times is what stories we tell ourselves. And there's a lot, and because there's power in stories. There is real power in stories. And we could talk about how story is used in marketing to succeed. That'd be cool to talk about too. But first, I want to talk about the stories we tell ourselves about what happens to us when we step into the arena of business or marketing. And then that story we tell ourselves is what becomes our reality and becomes our ego and our little protective world from the dragon that's trying to attack us.
The beginning of the first chapter, Monomyth, he talks about how myth and dream are closely intertwined. Myth is the series of truths, human general truths that have been made general enough to be understood across societies and cultures and humanity. That's myth. Dream are those same truths, but personalized, specific to the individual. And our dreams are very much influenced by what our environment shows us. So oftentimes when we have a dream, if you are one of the people who does not have dreams that you remember, then okay, I'm sorry. I don't I'm on the other side of the spectrum. I have dreams that are straight up movies or TV shows. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And sometimes the ending is not always good. But when I have my dreams, there is some crazy symbolism in there. And some people, it's like even more crazy. I mean, you see the movie Inside Out, excellent example of how, if you recall, Inside Out, they have the Dream Center is this like movie studio where they like are throwing on random productions every night. And it's just totally bonkers. Well, they're taking that kind of symbolism and they are putting it into a dream. They're taking things that the girl in that movie sees regularly in their day-to-day life and appears in their dream. So for us, we see things in our environment. We have feelings and emotions tied to visual symbols. And then those visual symbols enter our brain, enter our dreams. But there are truths hidden in those symbols. So the idea of myth versus dream and how those two things define us. And so ultimately, if we are letting ourselves be defined by our environment, it will show up in our dreams.
Yeah, I don't dream specifically. When I go to sleep, I don't dream very much. It's not like I've never had dreams. It's just very rare that I really experience them and wake up with, oh wow, that was a crazy dream. Like it does happen,
But do you
but
wake
it's
up
fairly
with
rare.
feelings, like emotions?
I mean, obviously I have emotions, but I don't think that there's necessarily a consequence of dreams. Sometimes though, I've had that experience. It's not like never happened. I just don't regularly dream.
Sure.
But one thing I do say I do is I think I dream a lot when I'm awake.
Ah.
I spend a lot of time fantasizing about the futures that I see for myself and people around me. And I will use my imagination to imagine what are future realities that can happen out of, say, certain actions or consequences of actions. This is something I was actually thinking maybe you and I can do sometime. I actually have run this for many, many people. It's a dreams exercise where I help people come up with over 100 dreams on their list of things they want to do in their life. And it really, I think,
You've mentioned this before.
it's super powerful. I just did it with my girlfriend like just last week to kick off this new year. And I'm telling you, it's like, I started thinking like, why am I not doing this with like everybody in my life at some point? Because it changes the way you visualize and function. And so the idea of dream, yes, there's a lot of metaphor and there's things that can be brought in that make you feel a certain way. And it can give you a reflection, I guess is what you're saying on your internal reality by analyzing your dreams, which I think there's probably something there. But for those of you who don't dream like me, and it's not something you can bank on when you go to sleep, I think there's real power in just crafting your own dreams and shaping them through a dream exercise like this so that you dream during the waking hours and you're able to start creating the reality that you want out of nothing. That's what metaphysics really is. And I'm talking about more than just manifestation. I'm talking about direction. There's real action involved. It's actually gives you intention behind what you're going to do this year. I have about 10 dreams that I really focused on this year that I want to get done. And part of that came out of this dream exercise that I just did on last Sunday. And so I think there's something there. Maybe we can make that a Patreon exclusive sometime.
Those dreams, those 100 dreams you're talking about, are the bliss that Joseph Campbell was talking about in that clip. And it's so on the nose. And the dragon, the ego, isn't necessarily the like, oh, I don't have enough money. The ego or dragon is your own rules, your own self-defeat that is holding you back. The things that the environment has told you over your lifetime that you have internalized so thoroughly that you don't even think it's possible yet. Knowing what one's bliss is a great way to get started. Knowing those 100 dreams is a great way to get motivated, to say, okay, I know there's treasure behind that dragon. I'm going to slay it. And of course, the dragon may not exactly be one's ego. The dragon actually may be a different obstacle that you have to get over. And we see this all the time in movies. The hero's journey in a movie is an internal journey that is represented through an external journey. And Neo in the Matrix, his internal journey is to recognize that he is the one. His external journey is to defeat the agents. And it happens at the same time when he recognizes that internal strength, he's able to defeat the agents. And then we get stuck with this other beautiful yin and yang plot line between Agent Smith and Neo. And that is a whole other chapter in The Hero with 1,000 Faces. The other thing I wanted to say about the hero in the hero's journey is we talked about how the tyrant is ruled reactively almost by their environment. So then what is the hero in relationship to their environment? And this is going to circle back to what we started to talk about in the very beginning. Joseph Campbell talks about the hero being the person. Here it is. The hero is the man of self-achieved submission. To that, I hear that the hero is the person that acknowledges the reality of their environment and submits to it willingly. Because if the tyrant is the person that is constantly fighting at their environment and seeing threats around every corner, the hero is the person that sees their environment, just like Siddhartha. They sit and they let the seasons pass around them. Things come and go. And the hero recognizes that that is the natural cycle. That is the natural order. I will weather the storm. To me, it is the hero is the person that with equanimity acknowledges their environment, what's happening around them, and lets it pass through them. And I think that is a message that all of us can reflect on, meditate on, internalize, journal. What does that mean to us when we think of how can I let this exist and be recognized, but then let it pass through me?
How do we be, in a sense, almost like what Bruce Lee said, be like water?
Yes.
And he that's what comes up for me, is that he used to always say, be water, my friends. When you put water, it can flow, it can crash. You put water into a teacup, it becomes the teacup. It's something that is fluid and powerful.
That's an interesting metaphor.
And I don't know if we want to be a rigid column in a storm. Do you know what I mean? Because then you're just going to get batted away, and erosion, and just, the column becomes brittle when it's so strong. But perhaps we want to be more along the lines of flowing with the winds and the tides, riding it in a way that it empowers us versus being rigid and fighting against it. Because I think there's something in there where when we fight against the external forces of the world, we are that stone column that just gets knocked over. But if you are flowing with it, you can actually ride the tides of a storm and make it to the next day where the sun comes out.
Yeah, even mountains crumble to rain and wind.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I really love that Bruce Lee quote, by the way. That idea, it's especially really perfect for Bruce Lee because he's a martial artist. He's always going
We'll
with
link
the
it in the
flow.
show notes. There's a great video of him talking about it. I'll link it in the show notes, so check that out, along with the other things we're talking about in this episode and the clip to Joseph Campbell. We'll put that all in the show notes for you guys so you can check it out.
Yeah, a little thing about that clip and that channel. The Joseph Campbell Foundation does share a lot of cool stuff, but some of it sounds almost a little hokey if you haven't read the book, or at least in my case, a chunk of it. It's very much you have to sit with it if you are willing to sit with it.
Well, let's jump over to the Patreon side, talk about how Joseph Campbell's used in marketing, because that's something I've actually learned quite a bit about how the hero's journey.
Oh, you too?
Helps with that.
Realize.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. No. Like I'll tell you that one of the best marketers in the world uses Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, and a big part of it actually comes into how he markets. So I think that'll be super interesting for people on the Patreon side, and our board members will get exclusive access to that. So if you want to jump onto that, go to patreon.com/nerdpreneur and sign up to be a member of our board of awesome nerds. And we will see you on the other side. But hey, for now, as always,
Keep it nerdy.